As the world celebrated the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, it now stands on the brink of a profound crisis. Is this a victory turned sour? Today, the roads thrum with the sounds of stalling trucks and weary lorries. Lines of desperate people clutch jerry cans, waiting at parched water stations, while mounting pressure on energy supplies reflects a dire reality that 2 million residents are now grappling with. Why would tens of thousands contemplate leaving their homes? At the Kerch Bridge, a bottleneck looms, a vivid representation of the peninsula's predicament. Reports document colossal delays, with queues of up to 900 vehicles stretching interminably. Imagine waiting for hours, surrounded by uncertainty, your basic needs unmet. This is no mere inconvenience, it's an economic deadlock, with broken supply chains adding to the frustrations. The heightened security measures, aimed at protecting the bridge, seem only to exacerbate the chaos. Every vehicle is treated as a potential threat, turning the everyday flow of life into a bureaucratic stranglehold. The situation grew more alarming when authorities announced bans on electric and hybrid vehicles from crossing the Kerch Bridge beginning November 3, 2025, fearing explosives might lurk within their batteries. This measure could further choke an already congested transportation system, effectively trapping vehicle owners with specific technologies in a region that is fast becoming untenable. Local insiders report devastating effects on logistics. Trucks have become immobile, their routes choked off by mounting obstacles. As infrastructure crumbles, particularly a crossing near Maslovo, fears for safety loom larger. Local residents voice concerns over deteriorating safety, feeling unheard by local authorities. These issues reflect not just isolated negligence, but systemic shortcomings that prioritize military aims over civilian needs. Amid persistent airstrike threats, the inhabitants of Crimea live in fear, their everyday lives overshadowed by chaos. In an attempt to restore some semblance of order, authorities look to ferry services as alternatives for mobility. But can these vessels truly compensate for a bridge's capacity? They, too, stand vulnerable as potential military targets. The pressure on supplies is undeniable, with many considering the prospect of leaving Crimea for good. Adding to this crisis is a looming drought. Reports indicate that water reserves are plummeting to alarming lows, particularly in regions like Alushta, where rationing has begun. Experts warn that the reservoirs here may sustain the population for a mere 3 months. The situation calls into question promises made by the Kremlin to fulfill the peninsula's fundamental needs, a stark resurgence of issues that first arose when Ukraine restricted access to the North Crimean Canal in 2014. The current military control proves ineffective against climatic challenges or logistical inefficiencies, leading to a critical shortage of not just water, but also agricultural and industrial resources. The urgency of the water crisis is matched only by the unfolding fuel crisis, marked by deliberate military actions targeting oil facilities. In a calculated strategy to disrupt Russian logistics, Ukrainian forces have struck oil depots within Crimea multiple times, causing supply shortages and fueling discontent among the populace. With reports of long gas station queues and strict fuel rationing, civilians bear the brunt of these military priorities. The military administration favors frontline allocations, leaving ordinary citizens scrambling for survival. The response to mounting unrest has seen authorities institute limits on fuel purchases, but panic remains palpable in these anxious times. As the peninsula teeters on the edge of resource depletion and civil unrest, the climate of tension thickens. A shift in internal politics begins to take root. The occupying leader, Aksionov, has laid blame on the Russian Ministry of Defense for exacerbating the water crisis, an unusual public admission of failure that signals internal strife. In moments of scarcity, fractures may appear between the Russian settlers and the local Crimean Tatars, heightening the threat of social conflict amid competition for basic necessities. Is the Crimean Peninsula doomed to suffer the consequences of negligence while seeking stability? Will desperation drive a wedge between people, or can some means of cooperation emerge from this chaos? The answers remain uncertain, but as tensions build, the landscape remains fraught with danger, a ticking clock in a race against time and resources. As the region grapples with a profound logistical crisis, another dire challenge looms, an alarming drought and severe water scarcity. Experts warn that the reservoirs in Alushta are dangerously low, barely able to satisfy 3 months' worth of water demand. Reports indicate that the Isabel No reservoir stands at just 24% capacity. Water rationing has already begun in Alushta since October 1, raising questions about the commitments made by the authorities to fulfill the basic needs of the population. This crisis is not new, it traces back to 2014 when Ukraine severed access to the North Crimean Canal. The current administration in Russia boasted of resolving this issue by reopening the canal in 2022, yet military control has proven inadequate against the harsh realities of climate and management failures. The peninsula is facing a critical shortage of essential resources. Water isn't just vital for daily life, it's essential for agriculture and industry. As the water scarcity grows, economic self-sufficiency in Crimea hangs by a thread. While the water issue unfolds gradually, a more immediate crisis is making waves: the fuel shortage. This predicament isn't a product of weather but rather military actions. Ukraine has strategically targeted oil depots throughout Crimea, disrupting logistical operations. On October 13, 2025, a significant drone strike ignited a fire at a major oil terminal in Feodosia. This wasn't just a one-off incident, multiple reports from independent sources indicate that these attacks have continually struck oil depots across the peninsula. As military infrastructures come under fire, the civilian sector is left suffering the consequences. Long lines snake out from gas stations in Crimea, as residents cope with limited access to fuel. With a strict cap of 30 liters per vehicle now imposed, many are left wondering, how much longer can they endure this fuel crisis while the military stakes its priorities elsewhere? The palpable tension of desperation permeates the air, thick with the smell of burning fuel and the sounds of frustrated drivers. Amidst these logistical limitations, will the local administration acknowledge the brewing unrest? As desperation mounts, the specter of social conflict looms ever closer. What happens when a community can no longer meet its fundamental needs? Will they resort to extreme measures to survive? The clock is ticking, and the pressures are escalating, setting the stage for an unfolding drama that threatens to engulf the entire region. Previously, we explored how drone strikes hammered Crimea's fuel depots in Feodosia, crippling supplies for both troops and civilians alike, leaving pumps dry and queues snaking like veins of desperation across the peninsula. Can you imagine burning rubber on empty tanks, the stench of exhaust hanging thick in the air, while your neighbors hoard every drop like liquid gold? Picture it, kilometer-long lines at gas stations, the rumble of idling engines echoing your frustration, the rough grip of jerry cans against sweaty palms as you beg for just a few precious liters. Ukrainian media blasted images of this chaos, with a strict 30-liter fuel cap per vehicle slapping families in the face. Why? Military gremlins at the top, supposedly funneling scarce stocks straight to the front lines instead of your daily grind. The scarcity screams so loud that the occupation brass scrambled to curb the panic, first slashing the limit to 20 liters, under the crush of mounting fury. But by October 20, 2025, they buckled, bumping it back to 30 liters a day. A desperate smile to mask the rot, pretending fuel flows freely rather than admitting the well's gone bone dry. Yet those endless waits by barren pumps? They howl the truth: this spin can't scrub away the domino crash, or a blow to army targets topples civilian worlds and rips open rifts on the home front. As Crimea shrinks into a cage of vanishing resources and choked escape paths, internal storms brew hotter than engine blocks in the sun. The claustrophobia, it could plunge the peninsula into whirlwinds of sheer terror and unrest. And get this, holding your breath yet, this calamity sparked a vicious blame tango among the rulers themselves. Quarrels erupt within the occupation hierarchy, fingers pointing like daggers in the dust, exposing not just a people in pain, but a crumbling command. Does this expose Moscow's iron fist slipping, or just the occupiers tripping over their own boots? Twist, the real shocker? Occupation chief Sergei Aksionov, once a puppet of stability, turned rebel, firing salvos straight at Russia's Ministry of Defense, accusing them of siphoning water en masse for bases and drills. Crack in the facade? Or precursor to total implosion? Aksionov claimed the army's gluttony thrashes reservoirs, fueling the drought menace. Pitted against Moscow's hype of showering billions into Crimea, his words sting like a betrayal, laying bare epic missteps even in guarding life's marrow, H2O. By prism this as elite self-defense, shielding his spot by stoking fires against Moscow's brass, redirecting civilian rage like a poison arrow. Early fractures gleam at the top ranks, as tourney dogs growl. Civilians, though? They scrape by amid water wars, where reservoirs in Alushta barely stretch 3 months' thirst, and Sevastopol's dam hovers at critical lows since October 1. The echo ripples far, first murmurs of social schisms, us versus them skirmishes brewing between settlers and locals, especially Crimean Tatars, as fights for fuel, oats, and flowing taps ignite ancestral tinder. But does Aksionov's gambit unravel the thread holding Crimea together, or embolden whispers of exodus among the desperate? The region of the Crimean Peninsula is grappling with an unsettling reality, shifting from a symbol of triumph in 2014 to a crisis-ridden landscape in 2025. Streets once vibrant are now choked with trucks, while citizens clutch empty jerry cans at water stations, waiting in vain for the most basic of needs. The everyday struggles of around 2 million residents paint a grim picture. Logistics that once flowed smoothly now come to a standstill, leaving families trapped in uncertainty, deprived of essentials. As the bottleneck at the Kerch Bridge intensifies, chaos reigns. Long lines of cars, sometimes stretching to 900 vehicles, transform into a surreal landscape of frustration and despair. Individuals wait for hours, their patience eroded by the crushing weight of not knowing when their needs will be met. This crisis is not merely a mild inconvenience, it is an economic stranglehold that imperils livelihoods. As supply routes collapse under the strain, the measures taken for security are only compounding the chaos. Every vehicle is now perceived as a potential threat, creating a hazardous environment where the flow of commerce and life grinds to a halt. In a shocking turn of events, officials have declared that electric and hybrid vehicles will be banned from crossing the Kerch Bridge. Starting November 3, 2025, these vehicles could potentially harbor explosives, a claim that threatens to sever vehicle owners from desperately needed mobility. Countless trucks have become immobilized, splintering the very fabric of transportation on the peninsula. As military traffic and airstrikes intensify, residents near the village of Maslovo worry for their safety. The maintenance of these crucial infrastructures is neglected, overshadowed by military demands. Yet beyond the tangible crisis of transportation lies a deeper struggle, the looming water scarcity. Experts warn that reservoirs can only serve the population for 3 months. As towns like Alushta ration their diminishing supplies, a sense of betrayal surfaces. The Kremlin's promise to fulfill the peninsula's essential needs now seems hollow, echoing a promise made in 2014 when Ukraine severed water access through the North Crimean Canal. This crisis of resources extends into the oil supply, where a recent drone strike on an oil terminal has exacerbated fuel shortages. Seemingly, military strategies overshadow civilian needs, forcing administration leadership to divert fuel to the front lines, leaving local citizens to fend for themselves. When residents flock to gas stations, they find not only scarcity but chaos, with long lines forming as panic heightens. As internal tensions rise, the balance of power is visibly shaken. Occupation leader Aksionov's allegations against the military for commandeering water serve as an admission that the social contract is fraying. As frustrations mount among the civilian populace, the question becomes, when does survival through cooperation give way to conflict? As the battle for dwindling resources intensifies, the risk of conflict based on entrenched divisions looms ever larger, exacerbating an already precarious situation. The local populace observes tension brewing not just between citizens and military authorities but also within the ranks of administration itself. Shaky foundations of governance heighten anxieties, while experiences shared by tourists in the summer reveal a far-reaching social disconnect. The cries for basic necessities echo through crumbling facilities, water and restrooms in short supply signal a broader societal failing. As the people of Crimea navigate these treacherous waters, the warning signs are clear. A fragile social framework has begun to erode, replaced by a landscape fraught with despair and confusion. Can the dwindling trust among civilians and the perilous management of resources be salvaged? Or will the struggle for survival drive the peninsula into deeper chaos? The echoes of sirens are not just calls to mask a failing structure, they serve as a haunting reminder of an environment where peace is breaking down and uncertainty reigns supreme. Imagine a place once hailed as a golden victory, the Crimean Peninsula. But now, in 2025, it's cracking under relentless crisis. Roads choke with endless trucks, people clutch jerry cans at scarce water points, the air thick with exhaust fumes and desperation. This land of 2 million souls faces dire hardships. Why? Tens of thousands are fleeing, not just the wails of sirens, but this choking tension, vanishing resources, a sense of being outsiders in their own home. Reports from September show rising pressure on civilians. Could this ignite social fires? The domino effect of gridlock logistics and empty reservoirs is tearing Crimea's economy apart. This Russian Riviera, flooded with post-2014 investments, now drowns in isolation. The Kremlin's grand plan crumbles under its own war's weight. What's the stark proof? Panicked sellers flood the real estate market. Russians and settlers rush to offload homes amid fear and failing lifelines. But who buys? Logistical nightmares. Kurs bridge bans, an uncertain horizon. Rental signs multiply, yet no takers. Alongside this crash, social bonds fray. A report from Russia's prosecutor general notes crime surging to a 12-year high. Crimea included. Hardship breeds chaos. Petty thefts spike from fuel depots, the stench of spilled gasoline lingering, illegal pipeline taps, the hiss of makeshift connections, hijacked water tankers rumbling through the night, looting abandoned stores, shelves echoing empty. Law clashes with chaos. What if this sparks a descent into anarchy? How long before neighbors turn on each other over a sip of water or a drop of fuel? The touch of scarcity bites harder than hunger. The smell of drought dust coats everything. Squeezed resources fuel us versus them divides. Will simmering tensions between Russians and Crimean Tatars erupt? Can the scramble for basics, water gurgling low, fuel tasting of desperation, shatter fragile peace? The struggle gnaws away trust. As political security overshadows public safety, neglect festers. When people feel unguarded, do they forge their own shields? This narrows the state's grip. In Crimea, the fraying social contract hints at clandestine survival networks. If Moscow's hold slips, what shadow alliances emerge? The peninsula teeters, resources dwindle, escape routes vanish. Panic looms. Elite cracks widen. Civilian anger boils over. Waiting, watching, as the home front crumbles, piece by piece. But wait, what if the next explosion isn't from drones, but from within? A sudden, brutal uprising? Or a mass exodus no one saw coming? The air hums with unanswered fury. In the dark shadows of the Crimean Peninsula, a troubling reality unfolds. Once perceived as a symbol of triumph in 2014, it now plunges deeper into chaos. Picture congested roads, an endless line of trucks, and desperate residents clamoring for water. The essence of life here is threatened, and approximately 2 million individuals face the struggles of daily existence. But what if I told you the situation has spiraled past mere inconvenience? Long waiting periods to find the bridge at Kerch, where lines of vehicles extend for a staggering distance. Imagine the anxiety as thousands wait, their basic necessities slipping out of reach. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's an economic crisis gripping the region. When supply chains falter, the repercussions are dire, yet measures to secure the bridge have only complicated logistics. Unexpectedly, an announcement extends the chaos further, a ban on electric and hybrid vehicles crossing the bridge, seemingly based on the fear of hidden explosives. Could this be the final straw for the suffocated population? Locals can't move freely, trucks are immobilized, while families anticipate their next meal with rising trepidation as military priorities overshadow their needs. Safety concerns amplify this distress, mired further by military strikes and the looming threat of violence enveloping daily life. But there's more at stake. As authorities pivot to ferry services, can these vessels handle the sheer volume, or are they merely a bandage on a gaping wound? The air thickens with unease as rumors of an exodus surface. The peninsula is under siege, not just militarily but logistically, and it's beginning to unravel. Simultaneously, an environmental crisis emerges, lurking painfully close. Drought suffocates the land. Water resources dwindle alarmingly, with reservoirs nearing catastrophic levels. How is it that promises made to ensure the basic needs of this region can crumble so quickly? The shadows of past decisions loom large as the implications of controlling a waterway become all too real. With dwindling water resources, agricultural and industrial viability hang by a thread, pointing to a broader collapse. Then comes an urgent revelation: fuel shortages escalate into a full-blown crisis. Direct military assaults targeting oil depots unleash chaos. These strategic hits appear to profoundly disrupt not just military needs but civilian life too. An incessant queue of vehicles lines up at gas stations, desperate for a precious supply that seems continuously out of reach. How can one organization deplete resources at such a rapid pace? With authorities rationing fuel, panic begins to seep into everyday life. Emerging reports highlight a stark reality: people are growing restless, some even turning to petty crime, theft from fuel depots and hijacking water tankers. As the political landscape shifts, tensions stir within the ranks of the occupying administration, an unexpected fracture in the authority that seeks to control everything. The blame game emerges. Leaders point fingers, and dissatisfaction brews among the populace. They begin to seek answers and protection outside the government's grasp. This crisis morphs into a desperate struggle for survival. Will the collective tension among the residents swell into social unrest? The foundations of authority begin to tremble, signaling a powerful and unsettling catalyst for change. As human and environmental crises collide, the air is thick with the acrid scent of spilled fuel, echoing the distressing sounds of discontent. It's a reality that could tip the scales. Will the complexity of this situation spark a rebellion among the inhabitants clinging to what little they have left? As fear and desperation intertwine, the question lingers: when will enough be enough? In the last segment, we explored the dire and evolving crisis on the Crimean Peninsula, marked by logistical failures, resource depletion, and societal strife. Reports emerged of crime surging to unprecedented levels, coupled with a government struggling to maintain control as its propaganda crumbled against reality. Now, let's unveil the shocking aftermath of environmental disaster that further complicates the already fraught situation. In a catastrophic event, two aging Russian oil tankers met their demise during a fierce storm in the Kerch Strait in 2024, spilling an estimated 3,700 tons of heavy M100 fuel oil into the pristine waters. This disaster did not merely ruin the local environment, it smeared a staggering 500 kilometers of coastline with toxic sludge. The ramifications are catastrophic. Not only was the delicate Black Sea ecosystem put at risk, but key areas such as the Opuk Nature Reserve were controversially converted into military firing ranges, where heavy artillery exercises are poised to occur through 2025. This situation encapsulates the myriad crises plaguing Crimea, revealing a dangerous entanglement of issues intensifying under pressure. We witnessed the disintegration of logistical lines like the Kerch Bridge, the alarming depletion of vital resources, and rifts within the occupation government itself. These crises illustrate an economic collapse compounded by a loss of control over the narrative spun by propaganda, leading to a systemic unraveling highlighted by international reports. Crimea is teetering on the edge of not just external military threats but also internal social fracture and administrative chaos. The implications are severe. The region is rapidly becoming militarily indefensible. As tensions rise both within and outside its borders, is Crimea destined for further disintegration? The stakes have never been higher, and the world watches as this once vibrant peninsula sinks deeper into turmoil. What will be the ultimate cost of this multifaceted crisis? Imagine this: a sprawling bridge, once a gleaming symbol of connection, now choked by endless lines of desperate vehicles, where families huddle in the biting wind, engines idling like weary hearts, wondering if they'll ever cross to freedom. Could a single policy banning electric cars trap thousands in a peninsula on the brink? Shocking, right? 347 characters, as restrictions tightened on that vital bridge, stranding owners of hybrid vehicles amid the chaos, the real nightmare deepened. Local voices whisper of dozens of trucks frozen in place, their drivers cursing the endless delays that cripple Crimea's roads. But wait, physical strains mount on every crossing. Repeated strikes and surging military convoys have battered the structures. Picture the rickety span near Maslovo village in the Dzankoy area, creaking under weight, rust flaking like old skin in the salty sea air. Residents share tales of dread. This path carries school buses filled with wide-eyed children, rumbling over potholes that jolt like thunderclaps. Why ignore their pleas? In 2024, families filed urgent complaints about its crumbling safety. Yet local officials brushed them aside, prioritizing other demands. Is this mere oversight, or a sign of deeper turmoil? The air grows thick with suspicion. Military needs eclipse civilian repairs, leaving bridges swaying in gusts, tires screeching on weakened decks. Feel the unease? Peninsula dwellers live in shadows of fear, hearts pounding at distant booms from airstrikes echoing like drumbeats across the hills. Sleep evades them, the night sky hums with unseen threats. How can anyone feel secure when the ground itself seems to tremble? All this mounting pressure, log jams, guarded choke points, fragile spans, has forced Crimean leaders to eye old alternatives, ferries slicing through choppy waves. Yet these boats, bobbing like corks in the Black Sea's swell, can't rival a bridge's flow. and their prime targets, horns blaring warnings into the fog. Rumors swirl of tens of thousands fleeing, suitcases clutched in the humid dawn, seeking escape from the squeeze. Unverified, yes, but the truth bites harder, supply stall, lives hang in limbo. The land chokes not from battles ahead, but from chains of its own making. Then, layered atop this tangle, drought creeps in like a silent thief. Experts warn of reservoirs dipping to peril, water levels in spots like Alushta barely promise 3 months survival. The sharp tang of dry earth fills nostrils, taps sputter weakly, promising little relief. Will promises hold, or shatter like parched clay? But what if the real storm brews in the fuel lines ahead, where fires rage and queues stretch into oblivion? The Crimean Peninsula, once a symbol of triumph, now stands at the brink of crisis. In November 2025, a new restriction will ban electric and hybrid vehicles from crossing the Kerch Bridge, igniting chaos in already congested traffic. With basic needs slipping away, how are residents coping in this increasingly precarious environment? As trucks pile up, stranded by the bridge's limitations, residents are forced to wait hours in frustration, deprived of essential supplies. The sheer volume of vehicles, up to 900 in a single queue, paints a dire picture of desperation. Local transports are at a standstill. Infrastructure, particularly at critical crossings like the one near Maslovo, is deteriorating. This bridge, a vital lifeline for school buses and civilian vehicles, now raises safety alarms among locals. Complaints have been lodged, yet the local authorities appear indifferent, revealing a deeper issue: systemic neglect prioritizing military over civilian needs. The once safe routines of everyday life are overshadowed by the looming threat of airstrikes, binding citizens in a web of fear. Meanwhile, authorities scramble to adjust, now pushing ferry services to address civilian mobility. But these ferries lack the capacity of traditional bridges, leaving vital traffic stranded and at risk of military action. With the logistical chokehold tightening before any military ambitions unfold, the region spirals into uncertainty. Drought compounds the problem, pushing water reserves dangerously low. Reservoirs in Alushta can barely cover 3 months of demand, and rationing is now the norm. The promise of basic needs from the governing authority is in jeopardy. The specter of water scarcity harkens back to 2014's geopolitical shifts, as previous guarantees now falter. Coordination problems exacerbate the already fragile conditions, leaving residents wondering, what will happen when resources run dry? The fuel crisis, unlike the slow-burning water scarcity, has erupted loudly. Military operations disrupt oil supplies, resulting in drone strikes against key depots. Venturing to gas stations, residents are met with long lines and strict rations, 30 liters up to 20, instilling panic in the air. As desperation mounts, is the administration's attempt to control the narrative really just smoke and mirrors? Each botched promise from the authorities erodes the trust of the populace, leading them to seek alternative means of survival. This unraveling of security and infrastructure adds to the growing dissatisfaction among citizens. Accusations fly within the occupying administration, as leaders point fingers over water shortages that grow more critical by the day. Tensions also rise between the newcomers and the original residents, highlighting the potential for conflict over dwindling resources. The struggle for essentials quickens the pulse of unrest. As the peninsula faces logistical strangulation and military maneuvering, will the pressure finally tear the delicate social fabric apart? As tensions grow and resources dwindle, residents brace for what might come next. In this tumultuous environment, crucial questions persist: can order be restored amid chaos? Or will the struggle for survival ignite an internal conflict that echoes far beyond the peninsula?